I understand it's been a while since the last installment of this makeshift series, and I want to apologise for that. I wanted to make sure I did the challenge justice, seeing how many of you were looking forward to this part in particular, plus, let's not beat around the bush, there is a lot of slavery in New Vegas. So, without further ado, today is the day we finally answer the question, can you beat Fallout New Vegas as Abraham Lincoln? For anyone starting here, I recommend you watch the first two parts of this challenge in Fallout 3 before continuing. But just in case, the gist of this run is that I have to free every single slave I can think of, and I cannot lie. I also have to do this while using appropriate clothing and weapons that will befit the man himself. So, things like suits, top hats, axes and repeaters, just to name a few examples. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's finally begin. Despite the length of this run, it actually had my fastest creation process by far, as I already had the footage from the previous videos to work with when making the face and assigning its stats. Just as a quick refresher, here are the special stats. Again, luck is at 1 due to the whole getting assassinated thing. That said, considering we shrugged off that bullet from John Wilkes Bennett, maybe his luck should be higher. Regardless, I once more take unarmed, guns and speech as my tag skills, and since New Vegas has access to traits, I also grab heavy-handed and skilled, as they seem like good choices for the build. Doc Mitchell informs me about the situation and how I was dug up from a shallow grave, so I check his house for any of my former items, such as my suit or top hat, but they are nowhere to be seen. However, it does look like he was able to recover the most important item of all, Lincoln's repeater. It's still in great condition, which is nice to see. The only downside as of right now is that it requires 44 rounds, which I don't have any of just yet. Leaving the safety of Doc Mitchell's abode, and I decide where to head next. While I could immediately start freeing any and all potential slaves right this second, as I still have Lincoln's fists to work with, in the end I ultimately decided that if I'm going to start freeing the wastes, I need to do so in style. So my first port of call would be to get my hat back, along with a matching suit. This meant I would need to head for New Vegas, so it's time to make my oh-so-favourite trip through the Black Mountain shortcut. As per usual, I made sure to get some worthwhile experience by killing the bark scorpions at Hidden Valley. They proved no match for the President's hand-to-hand combat skills. On the topic of Lincoln's punching prowess, I think we are long overdue for Abraham Lincoln fact number 5. I mentioned before about how Lincoln was a wrestler in his youth and was even inducted into the Wrestling Hall of Fame. Well, did you know that good old Abe may also have been the inventor of the choke slam, as a lot of accounts point to him being the very first person to use the technique. Back to the task at hand, after dealing with the scorpions, I make my way through the shortcut and out to the central desert area we are all too familiar with. For once, I actually decide to stop off at the NCR Sharecropper farm so that I can obtain the quest Hard Luck Blues, which we will be coming back to later once I'm better geared up. From here, I stop off at the Gunrunners as well as Mick and Ralph's to purchase as many different types of 44 ammunition as I can so I can start using the repeater. I'm able to brush the dust off it right away as some Freeside thugs offer themselves up for some target practice. As expected, the gun functions just like it did in Fallout 3, so no complaints here. Ammo is of course going to be a small issue for the time being, but I also know that some of the higher ranking Legion soldiers carry a good amount of ammo, so when I begin purging them from the land, I should begin to see a steady increase in ammo at least for a time. Having spent the majority of my funds on ammo, I lack the ability to pass the guards in Freeside, so I just opt for the safer route and take the monorail instead. Rather than head for the tops like normal, I instead head for the white gloves, as I have more pressing matters to deal with. Something interesting happened when I arrived. I was full well ready to kick the doors down and kill all the cannibals as I refused to hand over my weapons. But as soon as they all turned hostile, I just put away my weapon, and then they all just accepted my surrender and forgot about me. I have a feeling that this is obviously a glitch, but I'm not going to complain as it makes what's about to happen next a hell of a lot easier. Somehow, Mortimer, the cannibal bastard, got his hands on Lincoln's top hat. The fact he is eating people is reason enough to kill him, but as we know, he's also holding Ted Gunderson prisoner in his kitchen and plans to eat him. So... now, we are ready to free the slaves. As I just killed one cannibal, what's a few more? Thanks to Mortimer carrying around all of the keys to the Ultralux on his person, Lincoln can easily sneak his way through the kitchens and stealthily take out all of the cannibals, and I even get good karma for doing it too. After the bad apples from the white gloves are no more, I make sure to go and rescue Ted and bring him back to his father safely. With Beyond the Beef complete, I travelled back to Good Springs where I set about helping Ringo with his powder ganger problem as he is a friend in need. As you can probably imagine, the powder gangers do not last long against Lincoln's godly repeater. Good Springs was now saved from the wrath of the powder gangers, and I decided to follow the route towards Prim, as Deputy Beagle would need my help to escape the Bison Steve motel. While Beagle is not a slave to the convicts per se, he is their prisoner, which means, given the world that New Vegas is in, there's always the possibility they would sell him as a slave to the Legion, so we're going to stop them from doing that before the thought can even cross their minds. Once he's saved, I also agree to help bring law and order back to the town, as it just seemed like the right thing to do after all. This meant I would need to head to the Mojave outpost and gain the approval of Major Knight and Ranger Jackson, which is handy as I'm planning to head to Nipton anyway for obvious reasons. Helping out Jackson is a fairly simple task, as it usually is. If I couldn't kill giant ants by this point in the game, there would be something seriously wrong with me. This leads to a bit of fast travelling around and some conversing with NCR officials before I can leave Prim in the rightful hands of the government. The short road to Nipton is nothing too dangerous, just a few Jackal gang members who were completely unaware of just how outmatched they were. Making my way into the former town, first off I made sure to get the booted quest from boxcars so I can save the powder gangers who have been taken as slaves. We may have had our disagreements in the past of how they treated the citizens of Goodsprings, but I swore I would save any and all slaves, and I meant it. Speaking of, while I can't save the people of Nipton, I can at the very least avenge them. So, as soon as Volpe shows his smug face, I begin to open fire at him and his men. By now I already have a gun skill of 100 as I just funneled every single skill point into it as soon as possible to make sure I would get the most out of Lincoln's repeater right from the get-go. As you can imagine, this means the Legion's forces at this moment kind of just crumple like paper before President Lincoln. Volpe himself was incredibly lackluster as he didn't even get a chance to do anything, and in fact was the first to die after a few shots to the head. After I was finished wiping out this band of legionaries, I swiftly made my way for the nearby Legion raiding camp to save those powder gangers I just mentioned. Stealth once again proved to be a viable strategy as I was able to approach the camp unseen and take out the soldiers one by one rather than have them all rush me with their pointy sticks at once. I was initially concerned as after I untied the first hostage I went to do the same to the second, but the game wouldn't bring up the menu to do so. I have had this quest glitch out before on me, so thought maybe it was the spaghetti code, but as it turns out, this powder ganger was just close enough to another nearby legionary who was sleeping in a tent nearby, and as such, I couldn't untie him until he was dead. Not to worry, one quick bullet of justice later, I could free the slave, and the quest was complete. This combined with my recent murder of the fox lover puts me right at the top of the Legion's hit list. This becomes very apparent as not long after this, I am confronted by some Legion assassins who opt to shoot first and ask questions later. This could have possibly proved difficult, but due to this being my first time walking through the area, the scripted NCR patrol was here to back me up and could help take some of the heat off me during the fight. Thanks to their assistance, I actually managed to come out of the scuffle mostly unscathed. Which is good because I'm heading towards Camp Searchlight now, as there's some soldiers there that need saving, as well as another weapon I'm excited to put to good use. I speak to Sergeant Astor first to get the We Will All Go Together quest, just to mark the ghouls on the map and make my job a little easier. 9 of the 10 NCR ghouls are hostile on sight, but they aren't actually feral, or at least they aren't in the sense of gameplay. Rather, they're just normal ghouls who charge me with combat knives. This makes them fairly easy to pick off with one headshot each. After they're dealt with, all that leaves is Private Edwards, who has thankfully yet to go nuts. I cannot lie, of course, and I also do not wish to send him to his death, so I take the time to clear out the rat scorpions from the town. This includes the Queen, who nearly 12 years later still likes to haunt my dreams from time to time. To be fair, she's that big that it's fairly difficult for her to maneuver around inside the fire station, and as such, I can kind of just hide behind the desk and shoot her until she stops moving. With the scorpions dealt with, I can help out Edwards with his problems by using my speech skill to convince Astor that he can rejoin his squad, and thus save Edwards from potentially going feral inside the town. All that leaves is the weapon that I previously mentioned, which is none other than Knock Knock, the unique variant of the fire axe that can be found inside the bathroom on the top floor of the fire station. There may not be any vampires in the Mojave, but that doesn't mean the 16th president can't put this axe to work on some much deserved slavers in the near future. Before anything though, I return to Doc Mitchell so that he can cure my radiation, as I'm only a few rounds away from growing a second Lincoln.
If you know what I'm talking about.
Feeling good about freeing Private Edwards from those scorpions, I decided that I should go help more soldiers, so I was off to Boulder City to save Private Ackerman and Gilbert. Talking down the Great Khans or paying them off are of course viable options in their own right. But 3 videos in by this point, and I believe I've made it clear that we do not negotiate with those that take prisoners. On the bright side, I get to put the axe to good use, and even with my current melee weapon skill, it is still a very formidable weapon that cuts down Jessup and the Khans with ease, allowing me to save the soldiers. As I was leaving the town, the Khans sent in reinforcements, but once more, I shielded the NCR with my top hat and wiped out these crazy drug-loving addicts. With that taken care of, I figured I'd left Booth waiting long enough, and now seemed like as good a time as any to enter the tops. No guns blazing or axe swinging this time. In fact, I go with the semi-diplomatic approach as I use the lighter I got from the Khans, along with some speech checks, to convince Swank to let me into Benny's room. I meet up with Yes Man, chat for a bit, and then return to Swank, where I decide we're going to rewrite history by having Lincoln be the one doing the assassinating this time. Benny never knew what hit him. So after staging the body in a way that would definitely make it seem like an accident, I could finally be finished with my activities in the tops. As I leave, I don't even give Ilario a chance to open his slave-loving mouth, and instead I blast it right off his face. Making my feelings towards the Legion known, I head for the NCR embassy on the Strip so I could get the quest to enlist the aid of the Boomers. I'm not going to meet and greet them just yet, but I figured I might as well get the quest now to save on backtracking later. This is the part of the game where you'd usually be given the Mark of Caesar and be permitted entrance to the fort. I, of course, did not accept it, but I can still take the boat, so that's where we're heading next. On the way to the cove, I have a second run-in with the Legion assassins. They prove a little more difficult than the first group as I lack any form of backup this time, so it's a 4v1 scenario. That said, I also have Knock Knock now. So this means I can even the playing field when they manage to close the distance between us. When Cottonwood Cove is in sight, I don't immediately open fire for once, but instead, I sneak close enough to mark it on the map, and then fast travel back to Camp Searchlight and speak with Sergeant Astor to start the Eye for an Eye quest to get just a little bit more experience from the slaughter. He also tasks me with bringing back any Legion plans I can find along with planting a bug on their radio in the camp. Not sure how much he will learn from dead men, but whatever. Returning to the cove, and I had initially considered a stealthy approach once more, but as I have yet to put a single point into sneak, and the camp is overflowing with Legion, this plan of attack did not last long. Despite the fact I have 2 ranks in the toughness perk, it is becoming increasingly apparent that the top hat and snazzy suit combo does not do much in terms of protection, especially against legionaries with 44 magnums and hunting rifles. I am able to scrape by here as I can use the buildings for cover and abuse VATS whenever I can to quickly take out any approaching legionaries with headshots. When it comes to the leader of the camp, I just cleave his head off with Knock Knock. I then grab the absolutely pointless intel for Astor, but before pushing onto the fort, I of course must get to the real reason why I came to the cove. I was here to rescue the Weathers family from a life of slavery, and thanks to getting the keys to their collars from one of the many dead corpses, I could set them free with no fears of their heads exploding. After this, it was time to assault the fort, and it was pretty much more of the same. Although, when I entered Caesar's tent, I entered VATS in the off chance that I'd be able to take him out immediately. Sadly, that did not happen, but I was able to inflict a decent amount of damage on him. All of the Legion inside Caesar's tent carry melee weapons, so I used that to my advantage by luring them outside and taking potshots at them from a distance in an attempt to thin out the ranks. It does work relatively well as I managed to take out Lucius and Caesar himself. When it comes down to the last few Praetorians, however, I switch to the axe as its reach is longer than that of their fist, so I can keep them at bay while taking them down. Once the last Praetorian goes down, I find Caesar's body and make sure he is definitely dead before tossing it before the rest of the Legion in the lower end of the camp to show them what awaits them at the hands of Lincoln. I then head down to the bunker and wake up the Securitrons underneath the fort because I thought I may as well rescue them too. That said, I am not siding with Mr. House. When I make my way back to the Lucky 38, he prematurely congratulates me on a job well done, and right after receiving my payment, I hop, skip and jump my way down into the control room where I disable House's hold over the Securitrons on the Strip. I do not kill the man though, as it didn't seem like the right thing to do. At this stage I would usually continue the main quest, but that is rarely the goal of these Abraham Lincoln runs. Now was the time to start freeing all of the minor forms of slavery that could be found throughout the Mojave, and where better to start than by freeing Danny Trejo from the clutches of Tabitha. I enlist the help of Neil to distract some of the Nightkin on the way up to the mountain, but once more my pitiful sneak skill fails me in my time of need and I ended up having to fight them anyway. They aren't all that difficult though, especially when one of them lacks the mental fortitude to figure out how to bypass a small rock. Freeing Raoul is as simple as mashing random buttons on a computer, and after he hopefully makes it back to his shack safely, I take down Tabitha to guarantee she can take no more slaves from this point on. From this point on, there is really no rhyme or reason as to why I did the things in the order that I did. I was kind of just like a hyperactive ping pong ball flying back and forth across the Mojave, just liberating people as I saw fit. As it's something I tend to do in most of my playthroughs, even if I don't mention it, I was going to make my way for Novak and help out Boone with his whole deceased wife problem. Wouldn't you know it though, on the way I came across my third band of Legion assassins. As I am getting stronger with every slave freed, and they seem to be on par with their original versions, I am able to wipe their filth from the wasteland without breaking a sweat. In Novak, I quickly converse with Boone before becoming Ninja Lincoln once more, and procuring the bill of sale from Jeannie May, leading to the swiftest output of justice I have seen today. With the job well done, I briefly wandered north from the town where I bumped into the soldiers at Helios 1 and figured, yeah, I've got time, so I offered to help them with their energy crisis. I initially thought I would require a high science skill to proceed with the quest, but it turns out, intellect is once again second to brute force and ammo, as all I have to do is fight my way through some turrets and robots. You would think that the sentry bots may have been the main problem here, but in actuality, they never seemed too interested in prolonging their life and didn't attempt to fight back. What ended up being my downfall in here was Lincoln's overly long appendages, as one of my massive feet set off a landmine and thus separated it from my body. Being more observant of my surroundings made sure that it never happened again, and as such I made it to the main terminal in a few minutes. I thought for a while about where exactly to send the power to, and in the end I opted to send to the citizens of Freeside, as they seemed like they would need it more than the NCR. I was definitely considering using the death beam that comes with the power, but I decided against it. Giant lasers from space are more of a Ronald Reagan thing after all. Before going any further, I thought I should bring up the fact that I have been using the reloading benches to make 44 ammo, as well as just buying it. It's not really important to the video, but I figured you'd all shout at me about it in the comments if I didn't say. With all of this ammo, I of course need somewhere to use it, and I couldn't think of anywhere better than Gamora. However, before I begin the righteous slaughter, I instead briefly use my head as I hand over my weapons and use my persuasive top hat to gain the trust of Joanna here and start on the quest Bye Bye Love. The quest overall is fairly short as it only takes about 15 minutes. It can be summed up as Joanna needs me to see if her lover Carlitos is still alive, which he is, and then after some planning between the two of them, with me acting as a messenger, which I suppose is fitting, we get disguises for Joanna and her friend so they can escape the clutches of the Omertas, which ultimately ends in the fastest shootout ever as the Omerta thugs literally brought knives to a gunfight. Joanna and her friends were essentially slaves to the Omertas, so this works out quite well for me. Now, completing this quest does give me the opportunity to confront the Omerta's higher-ups and start the whole quest, but I have a better idea when it comes to them. Can you guess what it is? Well, that was a very fun and worthwhile experience. And I don't just mean the murdering of the Omertas. A lot of them are carrying 44 magnums, so that's a nice increase to my ammunition, but more importantly, I can take those magnums, fix them up, and then sell them for a lot of money. It makes sense Abe should be rich. He is on the penny after all. With my newfound wealth, I make a beeline for the New Vegas Medical Clinic and purchase a subdermal armor implant to boost my overall damage threshold to 10. After all, we can't say with certainty that Abraham Lincoln wouldn't have turned himself into a cyborg if given the chance. Another small thing I want to do in this run is of course have a fairly good reputation with the NCR, given that they are the closest thing to an actual government. That means it's back to Camp McCarran, but rather than just run for the monorail, I instead take the time to pick up some quests and get to work being a model citizen for the Republic. First up on the chopping block is bounty hunting, as I choose to head after some of the high-ranking fiends first. Most of my runs of New Vegas have me butting heads with Cook as I tend to pass through his home on my way to the Great Khans. I start by thinning out the herd. Ironically, that isn't me referring to taking out his Brahmin, but rather his men. They all go down without much resistance, which just leaves the two of us. I am fortunate enough to disarm him of his incinerator, forcing him to switch to his flamer, which he never gets a chance to use due to me rapid firing shot after shot after shot into his torso before he goes down. Next up is Violet, who is a blink and you'll miss it encounter, as I took her out from a distance with a stealth critical. That just leaves Driver Nafai, who, let's be real, was never a threat due to him having absolutely zero ranged capabilities. I return my bag of soggy heads to the Major and move on to my next task, war crimes in the form of prisoner interrogations. Talking things out wasn't going to cut it by the looks of things, so it resulted in a fistfight, where I played the fight like it was Mortal Kombat 2 and just continued to sweep the leg until he gave up and spilled the beans. Last of my missions at the camp was finding the Legion spy at the base, and due to having a little bit of previous experience with the game, I know the traitor is Captain Ronald Curtis, so as soon as I speak to him, I take the items I need from his person without him knowing, and then snoop on his treacherous ways in the control tower just long enough that I have the option to go and disarm the bomb on the monorail, finishing the quest. Still in a bit of a fiend killing mood, I head for Vault 3 next, where I decide it's time to take Knock Knock for a whirl once again. Killing the fiends is of course a noble goal, but I'm really here to save the civilians that Motor Runner has taken prisoner, as well as to rescue Bryce Anders from the confines of his room. I wish I could say me and Motor Runner had a duel for the ages, but that will be quite the lie, and we aren't about that in this run. I return to the Colonel to bump my rep up just a little bit more, as well as turn in Motor Runner's helmet for an easy reward. There is one other vault I need to tackle in this journey, so I figured I might as well do the two vaults back to back to get them out of the way. Remember the Hard Luck Blues quest I mentioned near the beginning of the video? Well, now it's finally time to follow up on that as I head to the East Pump Station near the Sharecropper Farm and put my science skill to use fixing this computer. The quest now points me in the direction of Vault 34 after getting the necessary intel. Come to think of it, I could have probably bypassed this part entirely and just went straight for the vault. The path leading to the vault is littered with golden geckos. Not to worry though, it's nothing that some special 44 rounds can't handle. Inside Vault 34 itself, and the place is entirely overrun with feral ghouls of varying difficulty. Due to their speed and the tight corridors of the vault, I once more tend to favour Knock Knock here, as it is able to cut through most of the ghouls with relative ease. If I'm being honest, it's been a very long time since I last ventured through Vault 34, and as such, I ended up getting lost in here multiple times while just trying to figure out where to head next. For some reason, I had convinced myself that I didn't need to head into the parts of the vault that had overflown with water, when in actual fact, that was where the keycard was that I required to proceed on. After finally deciding to go for a dip, I got said keycard, and from there was really able to get the ball rolling on the rest of the quest, as I can use it to access a terminal that will open the way into the Overseer's quarters. While on the topic of the Overseer, I think he may have glitched out for me, as he never seemed to move off of the platform that he was on. This meant I could easily take out his turrets with my rifle, and then pick him off as well, as he was hopeless to stop me. As I made my way into the lower reaches of the vault, the difficulty began to ramp up a bit, as now all of a sudden every single ghoul had ingested an alarming amount of glow sticks, making them considerably more powerful. Once they were dealt with, I find the terminal log that mentions the family that are currently trapped inside the vault, who will die if I do not transfer control over to them in the reactor room. While I am aiding the NCR as much as I can, I also cannot leave these people to die, so I transfer control to them, and then had plenty of time to ponder whether or not I made the right decision, as the game crashed on my way out of the vault. Next on my righteous to-do list, I head over to the Aerotech office park and speak with Captain Parker about any known problems in the area. This leads to him mentioning missing people that were last seen in the company of Dermot and St. James up in the Casa Madrid apartments in Westside. Fun fact about me, in all my years of playing New Vegas, this is only my second ever time setting foot in Westside. And I don't even have a good reason for why that is. Anyway, when I make it to Westside, I track down St. James, who pretty much confirms my slavery suspicions right off the bat, as he mentions missing refugees from Aerotech, despite the fact I never brought up Aerotech at all. While I could just shoot him and Dermot now and be done with it, I figured I may as well find some proof, as I know I'll need something to present to the captain. Getting evidence ended up being easier than I thought, as Dermot leaves his door unlocked for some reason, allowing me to waltz right in and grab his ledger, which clearly states all of his slavery business. That's more than enough evidence for old Abe, so I confront them both about their misdeeds, and then blow them both away with the repeater before they can even think about retaliating. I then hand over the ledger to Captain Parker and officially finish the quest, even though I really didn't need to, as they were both dead anyway. As I was deciding where to go next, I realised I completely forgot to free the NCR from Nelson, and so I made a beeline straight there. Right before I get to work, I meet Ranger Milo, who seems to be the first person I've come across so far who knows his American history, given the reaction he has to hearing my name.
Hold up there. This area is... Oh, heck. I've heard of you. Supposed to be a regular hero or something, ain't that right?
Sadly, I won't be working with Milo directly, as he wants me to kill the hostages so that he can send in his men guilt-free. That is, of course, against what we stand for here, so I opt to head into the camp myself. The Legion around the perimeter of Nellis don't pose any danger to me, as I'm able to pick them off from a distance. To be fair, they also don't fare much better in CQC, as I bring out Knock Knock to deal with Dead Sea. With the camp's leader dead, I head over and untie the soldiers from their crosses, which immediately makes me wonder why I can't do that with every person the Legion has crucified. Regardless, I escorted them to the loving arms of Ranger Milo, who I will just assume won't tell them about his plan to kill them. As I am in the area, I head down the road to find Private Reynolds and offer to help rescue more NCR hostages being held in the nearby mine, whose name I will not even attempt to pronounce, as I know I will get it wrong. The Legion in here really aren't all that bright, as they charge me one at a time with their makeshift machetes. Things get a little bit more hectic in the final room of the cave, as there's a lot of them, but numbers aren't enough to overwhelm Brute's strength and freedom, it seems, as I easily come out on top, grab the keys from Alexis, and then free the two soldiers for Private Reynolds. With that out of the way, I sorta just wandered around a bit, thinking about what else there was to do before I went to tackle the DLCs. To kill some time, I ended up helping the king out with all of his problems. This video is long enough as is without me going over these quests in detail, seeing how you can complete every task for the king without ever having to lift your weapon. Afterwards, I made my way for Jacobstown because I know if I don't help out the mutants there, then they'll be run off or killed, and we most certainly don't want that. When I arrive, I offer to help out Dr. Henry with his problem, and on my way to the cave, I use the absolute broken speech skill once again as I convince the nearby mercenaries to leave before I bring the full power of Lincoln down upon them. Fighting my way through the Night Stalkers to the Stealth Boy is rather straightforward, as all I have to do is never stop swinging the axe, and I am guaranteed to kill something. After grabbing the chewed up Stealth Boy, I return to the Doctor and quickly convince Keen this is a very bad idea by bringing up some incredibly basic logic. With that, the mutants in Jacobstown are hopefully saved, and I make a quick stop off at Brockflower Cave to marvel at my severed stone head. I had no idea how to seamlessly include this in the video, but enough of you asked me to visit it, so here it is in all of its glory. Enough stalling, it's time to jump head first into the DLCs and save every slave I can, as well as punish any potential wrongdoers. I decide that I'd approach them in the order they were initially released, as it makes the most sense, so that means after huffing some funky gas, we head on over to the Sierra Madre to begin Dead Money. I'm glad to get dead money out of the way first, as given the base rules I have for this run, all I have to work with are my bare hands, seeing how my axe and repeater are taken away from me right before the DLC begins. You may think this will bring with it a fairly big issue, as I need to dismember the ghost people before I can truly kill them. Well, in most situations you would be correct, as normal humanoid enemies usually cannot be dismembered with just your unarmed fists. The ghost people, however, seem to be incredibly squishy, as they pop like balloons after only a few punches. Not to mention, they aren't all that bright, and I can usually just run away from them with zero consequences, as they don't tend to follow you into different areas. Anyway, to get back on track, the first of my slave friends I go to rescue is Dog God from the prison, as Elijah, the old hermit who gassed all of us, recommended I sought him out first. The prison here does present us with our first hurdle in the form of the radios and loudspeakers that need to be shot, otherwise my head will look like a dropped watermelon. As mentioned, I don't have access to my repeater, so I can't use it, so I instead have to use one of the police pistols I found in the nearby desks. While this could be considered against the rules, and I can see the arguments against using it, I feel that so long as I only use it to take out these radios, then it is more of a tool and should be okay. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do this DLC, and if I can't rescue these slaves, then the challenge is truly dead. So I take the pistol and begin shooting every radio in sight as my life depends on it. By taking it slow, I'm able to reach the basement and find the recording that will allow me to force God to come out and speak with me. I of course want to remain on all of the companions' good sides, so that I can save them later and they won't try to kill me. So I just go along with what God says, making sure to only use dialogue options that I'm sure won't cause him to want to eat me later. With God Dog back in the main plaza, next up was Dean Domino. This is where it became fairly apparent that stealth was going to save me in this DLC, as sneaking my way to Dean, while long and tedious, proved to be a much safer strategy than running through all of the ghost people and hoping for the best. Arriving at Dean and planting myself down in the deadliest seat cushion ever, I get to talking and actually avoid any and all speech checks, as they usually tend to get you on his bad side. After convincing him to join the crew, I actually decided that it wouldn't be the worst idea to bring him along, as he reduces the damage you take from the red mist. Not only that, but Dean has a pretty high damage output, as he manages to easily take down any ghost we come across. As he is doing such a good job, I even bring him along to help me get the final heist member, Christine. Well, as it turns out, he ended up not really being needed, as the clinic where she is guarded by holograms that cannot be hurt, but will disintegrate us in seconds if they spot us. This means stealth is now required, rather than just implied. Thankfully, it doesn't take very long to find Christine, as she's stuck in a giant tube. The only issue is she cannot speak, so there's a little bit of a communications barrier. Or at least there would be if I hadn't played through Dead Money before, so I can just mash my way through her important dialogue and get to the second part of this heist. There isn't a whole lot for me to say about this stage, as it's fairly similar to the first part, as I just have to run to different areas of the villa. The major difference this time being that I have God, Dean and Christine to back me up when I'm leading them to their positions. Basically, this means I don't have to engage in any combat whatsoever and leave all the fighting to them while I skulk away. In some situations like Dean, I do have to go out of my way to help them though. For example, for him, I need to turn on some holograms, as I don't want to risk annoying him with speech checks, and I of course cannot lie to him to take the easy way out. Once the three of them are in position, it's up to me to light the fireworks. Reaching this point all by myself is fairly difficult, I will admit, as the amount of bear traps and ghosts present is staggering. But I managed to pull it off thanks to gathering all of the Sierra Madre chips that I could and spending them on healing supplies. One benefit I suppose of not using firearms here is that I don't have to spend the chips on ammo. We can now all enter the casino where, surprise, we're all gassed for a second time. Wonderful. This time when I wake up I still have all of my stuff, thank dog, but now I have to deal with more of the killer holograms as well as tracking down my companions, again, and dealing with them as I see fit. Lucky for me, I prepared for this part a long time ago by making sure I'd maxed out my repair skill before even setting foot in Dead Money. This means, so long as I can find these little blue lights on the floors and walls, I can deactivate the holograms and save myself a whole heap of trouble. Now, on to meeting up with my heist friends again, and I decide to pay Dog a visit first, mainly due to the fact he's about to blow up himself and the entire casino. First attempt and I went after the gas leaks, which was a big mistake, so next attempt I just rushed Dog and began talking some sense into him. I am of course here to save him by any means necessary from being the slave, so I bring out the big charisma guns as I persuade him so hard that I end up making him create a completely new personality for himself. Neat. Next up to rescue is Dean, and I'm glad to see when I meet up with him that he still refers to me as partner and doesn't want to kill me, which is something that kept happening to me before my own playthroughs. Saving Dean is more of the same, just taking it slow down long corridors, making sure to turn off all radios before my brains end up painting the walls. The two of us then have a very long chat where he basically explains the plot to anyone who hasn't been paying attention, but more importantly, I level up and take the Slayer perk, allowing any unarmed or melee weapons to attack 30% faster. I don't want to oversell it, but I think this will increase the DPS of Knock Knock enough that it will now outclass the repeater. No time to think about that, however, as I need to meet up with Christine and hand her a passcode and can now finally enter the vault. For clarity, that is a vault as in like a bank vault, not like a vault we would usually be talking about in Fallout. Just thought I should make that clear. There are no hostiles in the vault itself, bar a few holograms, but as mentioned before, I can deal with them easily enough thanks to my repair skill. What this means is I can make it to the vault just like I would any other playthrough and begin the heist of a century. You're crazy if you thought I was going to leave here without all of the gold bars. And thanks to this video I found by Scandi TV, I now have an easier way to do it than the old way of using Elijah as a makeshift shopping bag. Essentially, all you have to do is grab all the gold bars, as you normally would, convince Elijah to fight you like a man, and then when he's on his way down, use a stealth boy, which you can usually find in the vault as I did, and then wait by the pylon until he activates the terminal, and as soon as he does, you can just slow walk your way to the exit, and if your timing is right, you will get past before the energy door comes up, and can just stroll to the exit and finish the DLC. With dead money finished, I am back in the Mojave, and the first thing I do is drop all of the gold and don't bother selling it. You may be asking yourself, why did I go through the trouble of bringing it all back then? And it's simple.
It's not about money, it's about sending a message.
No point slowing down now, next was Honest Hearts, and I don't know how to say this any other way, but I don't really have a lot to talk about here. Much like when Abe took the fight to the Covenant in the Mothership Zeta DLC for Fallout 3, there isn't a lot to really go over here as it's mostly just non-stop fighting from the moment you arrive and the happy trails become the blood trails. The Whitelegs can pack a punch, especially those carrying brush guns, but other than that, nothing else here was much of a challenge. I do get a new friend though in the form of Follows Chuck. He hits pretty hard and has the special ability to turn into a watchtower from Far Cry, as he can mark locations for me if I get him high enough. He leads me to everyone's favourite murder priest, Joshua Graham-Cracker, and I'm immediately sent to work to gather helpful supplies for the tribe, such as a compass, medical supplies, and abandoned pack lunches. I then take the supplies to his friend Daniel, and he gives me the rest of the DLC's main quests all at once, for me to tackle in whatever order I so choose. First task has me go into a cave to find a supply cache, which as you can imagine is fairly straightforward. It would have been even faster if I was competent enough to break an average lock. Next, I help out by disarming some bear traps on a bridge. Truly thrilling stuff. This then leads to the rest of the quests taking a strange turn, as all of a sudden, they're all about killing the Whitelegs, them being the rival clan working for the Legion. Again, they aren't that tough, so nothing to worry about here. Lastly, for my seemingly random tasks was to get rid of some Yaogwai, and I opted for the path of least resistance, meaning, rather than face them head on, I caved in their cave and finished the quest that way. Believe it or not, that's it when it comes to the main quests, as now I can either choose to side with Daniel and escape, or side with the toasted marshmallow and kill every one of the Whitelegs to ensure they can harm no one else and cripple the Legion in the process. I of course join up with the latter as we mindlessly slaughter our way to the Whitelegs leader, Salt Upon Wounds, where I stop Joshua at the very last second from executing him, because I wanted to do it, ending Honest Hearts, and surprising myself in the process as I finished the entire DLC in just over an hour. I always thought the DLCs for New Vegas were quite long, but it seems that I may be mistaken as the final two that I'm about to get to also took me about an hour each. Old World Blues is up next, which seems to be most people's favourite, and I must say I also am a fan of Metal Gear Solid, as I too quite enjoy incredibly long periods of nothing but pure dialogue. Which, to jump the gun a bit here, the excessive amounts of dialogue for this and Lonesome Road are probably the reasons why I remember them being a lot longer, as this is the first time I've actually just skipped past most of it. First thing we learn is that Lincoln is now without a brain, heart, and spine, as they have been replaced by more cybernetics. This, coupled with the implant I talked about earlier, makes it seem like he's more machine now than man. Much like the beginning of Dead Money, I am given 3 objectives, and it is ultimately up to me to decide where to head first. Speaking of Dead Money, I completely forgot to mention that while I was there, I got my old suit back from Fallout 3. Even though the DLC was called Dead Money, I kept referring to it as Blood Money, probably because the suit was reminding me of a certain bald individual. The first facility I venture to is X8. There isn't much in the form of resistance on the way there apart from Night Stalkers, so I'll skip ahead to the facility itself. Inside, I have to run a test in which I have to navigate around an old high school building, fending off cyber dogs and the like while searching for 3 student files. As I suspected earlier after grabbing the Slayer perk, Knock Knock now outclasses the Repeater in terms of both overall damage and DPS. Plus, I picked up the Piercing Strike perk a while back, meaning it also ignores up to 15 points of a target's damage threshold as well. While it is now a better weapon, that's not to say I still don't use the Repeater, as after all, it may be weaker, but it certainly has a lot more range than an axe. Grabbing the files is easy enough in the end, as even the lobotomites with their proton axes don't survive long. To address the proton axe briefly, I considered about whether or not I could use it, as it is still technically an axe, albeit futuristic, but I decided against it, not even so much as the fact it looked out of place on Abe, but more so because mine was a lot better. Regardless, they still make for good repairs thanks to jury rigging. After getting the 3 files, my next task was a simple one in that I had to search some mounds of dirt to find an audio sample of Gabe's bark. Who is Gabe, you ask? Well, he is this giant guard dog that was experimented on by one of the think tank's doctors, so naturally I put him out of his misery. After dealing with him and grabbing the soundbite of his bark, I am assaulted by Dr. Mobius's robo-scorpions. Yet again, the axe makes fairly short work of them. All I have to watch out for is the small explosion after they die, as it can cripple my legs if I'm not careful. With that, my work is finished in the XA facility, so now it was on to X2. On the way, I took out what I believe to be a special robo-brain named the Super Eco. I'm not too certain what makes it unique, as it went down just as easy as any other. Making my way for the objective at X2, and I forgot just how short and straightforward it was. All I had to do was cleave up a few protectrons, make my way back outside, up this ladder, and grab the emitter at the top of this dish. Sure, the Robo-Scorpions attack once again, but they can mostly be ignored as I take the mountain path here to the left, which conveniently leads me quite nicely into the final facility, where I have to complete a stealth exercise to steal some documents without being detected. I actually ended up failing the stealth test on my first attempt as I got spotted by a Robo-Brain. What I forgot, however, was that you can in fact kill the sentries and then sneak on through. So I did that on my second run, and I was able to reach the documents no problem. All that was left now was to report my success to the smart brain jars so that I could begin the final quest and confront Dr. Mobius at the Forbidden Zone. All that stands between me and him are more Robo-Scorpions and multiple crashes because my PC really does not like the Forbidden Zone for some reason. Once I made it in without New Vegas giving up on me, it was time to face the final boss and possibly the biggest robot in the game, the X-42 giant Robo-Scorpion. I figured using the repeater would be the best idea, as after all, I don't want to get too close, right? As it turns out, it shrugged off my bullets like they were nothing, so Lincoln threw caution to the wind as I jumped down and engaged it head on. It was able to hit me one time with its laser tail, which managed to cripple my leg in the process, as well as give me minor radiation sickness. That wasn't enough to stop my onslaught though, and in no time the Robo-Scorpion was up there with Scorponok from Fable as one of the easiest Scorpion bosses I have ever fought. All that leaves is Mobius, but in true Shyamalan fashion, it's a twist, and he isn't truly the villain, but rather, he has been trying to keep the think tank in Big Mountain to stop them from experimenting on people in the wasteland. These experiments would have them capturing people against their will, which of course we cannot let stand, so now the mission's changed and the think tank must die. However, first off, I convinced my brain to come with me by simply explaining how I'm going to use my axe to take down the think tank. I then head back to the think tanks, and true to my word, whip out the axe, and begin going to town on the scientists. Unsurprisingly, they aren't good fighters, and I'll go down in a few swings, saving innocents from their nefarious ways, and finishing Old World Blues. That said, before heading back to the Mojave, I make a quick pit stop at Little Yangtze to put the Chinese prisoners out of their misery. I actually forgot this place existed, so I thank all of you who reminded me about it in the comments. You all mentioned though that there's no way to take off their collars sadly, but that killing them would be a kindness so that they can no longer be slaves. All that leaves is Lonesome Road, and let's not beat around the bush, it was a complete breeze from start to finish. A few months ago I went through all of Lonesome Road at a much lower level, armed with nothing but a BB gun, so attempting it now with much better weapons, stats, and being close to max level made the whole experience a walk in the park. I even managed to one-shot a Deathclaw at one stage with Knock Knock. It took me by surprise so much that I had to double check I hadn't accidentally lowered the difficulty, which as it turns out, I hadn't. The biggest problem actually turned out to be the satchel charges, if you could believe it. By this stage I've yet to put a single point into explosives, as why would I when I can't use those weapons? This does mean, however, that I didn't have any time to disarm the charges and would get ragdolled around every few minutes. The infamous lift segment with the tunnelers was honestly more of an eyesore than anything else thanks to the explosions, as I could knock most of the tunnelers off the elevator before they got a chance to climb on and fight. As for any slaves in this DLC, the only one is Eddie I suppose, once he gets taken by Ulysses near the end. But it's fairly straightforward to get him back, as all you need to do is take out a few sentry bots and use a nearby terminal. All that leaves is Ulysses himself, and I was full ready to fight him before starting the video. However, many of you made the point that since he names himself after Ulysses S. Grant, and the fact that he is misguided, that I should take the effort to talk him down. Well, I didn't put all those points into speech for nothing I suppose, so I managed to make him see reason, and then the two of us, plus Eddie, stand together and fend off the approaching waves of marked men with the power of the Union. Once the fighting had ceased, I made sure to redirect the missile away from the NCR, and instead had it fire upon the legions situated at Drywells. This not only takes out some Legion, which is always good, but also completes my bonus objective as this little massacre makes me idolized by the NCR. That wraps up the last of New Vegas' DLC, but just like Old World Blues, there's one last loose end to tie up. I am of course referring to Drywells, the place I just turned into a ghoul's paradise, as I can take a boat at Cottonwood Cove and personally wipe out any Legion survivors. The Legion small fries are of no importance. What we are here for is their leader, Gaius Magnus. I remember him being a fairly tough fight, But, once again, I seem to be misremembering parts of the DLC, as while he can sure pack a punch with his little machete, he can't withstand Lincoln's highly impressive melee build and becomes just yet another legion felled by the President. And now, that was it for any and all side activities, so I think it's finally time to wrap things up with the main story. First, I head for Nellis, as I've been sitting on this mission for Ambassador Crocker for so long now that I wouldn't be surprised if he thought I just bailed on him. Rather than just doing the minimal effort for the boomers, I for some reason decide to help them with all of their problems. So I helped the patients, listened to history, was nice to Pete, fixed the solar panels, dealt with the ants, and finally I even helped Jack with his love problem. That of course takes us to the bomber, and I don't require the rebreather as my endurance is through the roof, giving me lungs of steel apparently. Now having a bomber at their disposal, I ally them with the NCR and then get sent on my next negotiation as I try to ease tensions with the Kings in Freeside. As I did help out the King earlier, I made the smart move to save my one favour and as such used it to complete this quest as soon as I can. I am now promoted to work with Colonel Murr at Hoover Dam, and her first order for me is to wipe out the Great Khans. I may have had some disagreements with them in the past, mainly Jessup, but I still didn't feel right killing them all. Determined not to have more Khan blood on my hands, I spoke with their second-in-command Regis about a way to break their relations with Caesar's Legion, which is quite easy to do. First, I just present Papa Khan with a diary showing him exactly how the Legion feels about the Khans, which then leads to them making very short work of Karl. Next, I use my speech skill to explain to Jack number 2 about just what exactly will happen after the Legion takes the dam. This then gets him and Diane on board. Don't worry, while this may have skipped the initial quest to save him, I still have the option to go and save Anders from his horrible fate at Cottonwood Cove. All that leaves is Melissa, who is up in Quarry Junction. That means fighting through Deathclaws, which goes pretty well, until it doesn't. A few attempts later, I get good luck with the Super Slam perk, allowing me to deal with them one at a time. I then meet up with Melissa, question her about how much she would like being a slave, and now can return to Papa as all of the Khan's leaders refusing allegiance with the Legion. This gives me two options: either I let them go and be free, or I ask them to ally themselves with the NCR. Well, the second option can only be accomplished by assassinating Papa Khan, so I decide them walking free is probably the better call, all things considered. The Khans are now out of the picture, and thanks to me getting ahead of the curve by taking out House and the Omertas, all that leaves is the Brotherhood of Steel. Now, I know what you're thinking, a house divided and all that, Lincoln should recruit the Brotherhood to fight for the NCR. And I too agree with that stance, but here's the problem. When you approach the base, they put a bomb collar on you, or a slave collar as they're more commonly referred to. Who am I to say they won't do this to someone else? Abraham cannot take that chance, so it seems the only way forward is to open some tin cans. With an axe. The slaughter is quick and clean, almost like I should have done this way before I was level 40. I do apologise if some of you are not happy with this outcome for the Brotherhood, but let's just say I don't think this is the last time Lincoln will be butting heads with them. All that remains was to protect President Kimball, and I won't lie, there was a temptation to let him be killed, as how else am I going to become the president? But no, saving Kimball was the right thing to do, because as Lincoln knows, his bodyguards probably can't be trusted to protect him. What am I getting at here? Well, I think it's time for Abraham Lincoln fact number 6. The night that Lincoln was assassinated at the theatre, his bodyguard, John Parker, was absent as he left his post to go to the saloon next door, where none other than John Wilkes Booth was drinking. It is said to this day, no one knows exactly where Parker was when Lincoln was killed. Back to the attempted assassination at hand, I take out the Legion sniper as I lie in wait for him, and then confront the second assassin with the detonator, and manage to take him down myself, which is a nice change, as usually when I attack him, the NCR swarm on me like a pack of hungry dogs. I then make sure Kimball gets away to safety, and now it is time for Lincoln to make one final push against the Legion at Hoover Dam. The so-called might of the Legion cannot even begin to stand up to the force that is cyborg Abraham Lincoln. With all of my perks, skills, and this gun and axe, I carve a path through wave upon wave of Legion soldiers as I make my way for Legate Lanius, the last known cog in the Legion's chain of command. I spoke with the Legate first, and while I could talk him down, that has never been my first choice when engaging the Legion, so of course it is time to fight. Well, if you could call this a fight. The poor man gets ragdolled worse than I did in Lonesome Road. He didn't even get a chance to land a single hit, whereas I came out of the gate swinging and looking for blood. His reinforcements tried to intervene, but they too got super slammed to a much deserved early grave. I then unceremoniously killed the Legate while he was face down in the sand, get a dramatic shot of me walking to the gate, spoke to General Oliver, and after many months can finally say the words, "Yes, you can indeed beat Fallout New Vegas," as Abraham Lincoln. Oh my, that went on way longer than I expected. I thought it would be a while before anything overtook Arkham Knight as the longest video on the channel. I really hope this was worth the wait, seeing how it has been requested as far back as September last year. The video was long enough as is, so I won't prattle on much longer, but I will say, yes, you can expect to see Lincoln again sometime this year, and that also there may not be a video next week, seeing how I may have spent a little longer on this than I had initially planned. Regardless, it's going to be on this challenge video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider giving the video a like, and you're interested in more challenges in the future, feel free to subscribe to one of these videos every week. My name's Nerbit, stay safe everyone, I'll see y'all in the next video.